Well, welcome everyone to the inaugural Ministry Toolbox. I am Steve Lindsley, your executive presbyter, and I'm really excited about this monthly-ish webinar series that we are offering, where we bring in an expert, a practitioner, someone with some know-how and experience, and dive into a particular ministry topic that is something that we all can learn from. We've got toolboxes set up through through the end of the year, which is great. But I'm always looking for new topics, new themes, and especially if you have a good person to lead it with me, that would be great. So feel free to shoot me an email anytime and share that with me. But I'm so excited that we get to start this off with Reverend Dr. Jerry Cannon from the Board of Pensions to talk about shared ministry, what it is, all the things we need to know, and then especially ways that the Board of Pensions incentivizes congregations that decide to engage in shared ministry together. And the way this is going to work is it's going to be mostly a conversation, or at least the first part will be a conversation between Jerry and me. As you have questions, if you will maybe write those down or just make a mental note near the end of our hour time together, we're going to circle back probably about 45 minutes in. If that, we'll circle back so that you can have an opportunity to ask Jerry questions yourself. So with that, we're going to get started. Reverend Dr. Jerry Cannon, thank you for being with us, sir.
Hey, thank you. Welcome to everybody. Glad you're here. Bring your greetings from the Board of Pensions. I would say 2000 Market Street, but I'm sitting in an airport lounge right now having this conversation. I don't have the cool points as your executive presbytery with the little earbuds. I've got the old, how may I help you? Do you want French fries and shakes with your order here? But hope you can hear me okay. If not, I'll try to use my preacher's voice and take your order a little bit better.
Yeah,
But
no, you look quite cool with that. You look extremely professional, and we're grateful for that. And Jerry's not kidding when he mentioned about being in the airport right now. This man does more airport and flying than most people I know. So we're great for that. Jerry, I would love for you just to take a minute or two to sort of introduce yourself to us. However you want to do that. You work with Board of Pensions, your personal life, whatever you want to lift up for us, so that we know a little bit about who we're hearing from tonight.
thank you, Steve. Yes, y'all, I bring you greetings again as a member of Charlotte Presbytery. We moved to Charlotte in 1992 and called to C.M. Jenkins, and by God's grace and mercy, stayed there for 30 years and have been with the board now for about 3.5. Prior to coming to Charlotte, was at the Northeastern Presbyterian Church in National Capital between 1988 and 92. Um, Married to Veronica Cannon. She is the kind of stated supply pastor at First Presbyterian First Waxhaw. And so we are a clergy couple with 4 adult. I used to call them dependents, but you don't get a tax break when they're over 30 years old. So uh, we have 4 children, and it's a joy to be engaged in ministry. And so looking forward to sharing tonight and hearing from you all um, some of the joys of ministry, but also the exciting things within the presbytery.
Thank you. Yeah. And the other thing I'll add on top of that, and one of the things that Jerry does so much of is a lot of preaching at conferences and different events and things like that. If you go to a Presbyterian sponsored event somewhere, chances are you're going to hear Jerry preach. I have experienced that many times, and it is a joy to experience Jerry preaching. So I'll just kind of throw that in. What brings us here tonight is diving into the ins and outs and ups and downs of shared ministry, and I think it'd be good to kind of start high level with this at the beginning. So, Jerry, can you just sort of unpack for us again at a high level, what is shared ministry?
Thank you. Shared ministry, and if you all have any questions, Pastor Steve has said to hold them to the end, but like me, I can't remember things, so I might have to raise my hand and raise the question. But shared ministry is a dues incentive program um, designed for ministers of the word and sacrament who serve congregations. It is for two or more congregations to create sustainable pastoral positions and calls. It's for installed or non-installed pastors. Um, the idea is that we want to support those who are serving the church. It is an employer program, like all of our programs, meaning that the incentive and the dues discount goes to the church, not the pastor, but to the church. So all the savings, all the discounts are really to help congregations with their finances, but also with their vision.
Yeah.
Um, that's pretty much the elevator speech.
Yeah. So you say two or more congregations decide that they want to do this, and
Hmm.
and just to clarify, that it's there's still two or three churches. They have their own sessions.
That's
Um,
right.
they have their own worship services. They may do things together, but that's not like necessarily required. Um, but there, it's two separate congregations with one pastoral leader kind of leading them both. Is that a fair way
That's
to
it.
unpack it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Why in your experience in working with congregations and just your general awareness as a longtime
Mhm.
pastor in our denomination and as a pastor, why might a church, or two churches, I guess, or a church, why might a church consider shared ministry as a possible way forward for them?
Sure, great question. I think I would respond to say for opportunities for ministry, as well as the buzzword we're trying to make sure that we embrace is sustainability. We all recognize from coming out of COVID and even pre-COVID that the church was changing. Um, those things that we kind of took for granted, that people were going to come to church uh, for weddings, for baptisms or funerals. That's not necessarily the case. And so, what was the natural magnetic attraction of church had to be adjusted. And the reality of, what we know of as pastors many times is just the resources and just not there. The resources to support a full-time pastor, the resources to support program for a DCE, an associate pastor. So what shared ministry gives is not a survival tactic as much as it is an opportunity. And I lean into that heavy because I would want persons engaging in shared ministry to see that this is a new way for us to provide benefits for the pastor, but also for our congregation to receive the seminary trained pastor who has completed all the ordination exams, who's taken all the languages, all the requirements, and now he or she wants to serve full time. But because of the resources being limited in congregations, that the benefits package is something where the Board of Pension says we want to support the congregation. And by supporting the congregation, by reducing those dues, if that enables them to really have that full time pastor, then it's a win win for all.
Yeah, thanks for that. I was struck by the way that you described this being an opportunity not just for churches to survive, but be sustainable and even thrive. And I guess what I kind of took away from that is um, it's it's helpful when a church enters into this that it's certainly about going forward, but it's not just we're just trying to make it through the next day. It really is we feel called to enter into this new kind of ministry that's going to guide us forward for however long it's going to guide us forward. Is that, I don't know if I verbalized that correctly, but that's at least what I
Absolutely.
thought. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so in other words, One of the questions that I kind of had in my mind is: are there any reasons that a church should not consider this, or not great reasons to consider it? And I think what I would take from that is, if the church is just wanting to get by for the next 6 to 8 to 12 months or something like that, and just survive. I mean, it's that mindset of scarcity versus the mindset of abundance. That it's really a whole different perspective of how a church can be church going forward.
Yes, thank you. And I'm glad you framed it that way because one of the things that the board encourages is those conversations with COMs, with mid-council leaders, and with pastors themselves. Because not only are we speaking of congregations deciding to share a pastor, we're also talking about a pastor deciding to serve multiple congregations. And so it is, in order for it to be a win-win, you have to have not just good dance partners, but you have to have individuals who want to be at the dance on both sides.
Yeah.
So yes, it's an opportunity. Um, and the way the program works, again, briefly, it is a 5-year program. For the first 3 years, the dues are reduced 50% up to $10,000. So if the dues are reduced up to $10,000 and the churches engage this agreement at a 50-50 kind of percentile, then each church will receive a $5,000 credit. And that's done immediately. And the way that works out is that hypothetically, if the church dues for the Board of Pensions are $500 a month, and each church is receiving a 50% credit, which simply means the dues are now $250 a month as opposed to 500. And other way I share this, you all, is that some churches have already done what we call split service. And they've said, we want to share the pastor, we'll split the cost 50-50. The best way in terms of simple mathematics, if congregation A says we want to employ a pastor and the benefits for that pastor are $20,000 a year, and congregation B says we want to employ that a pastor, the benefits again are 20,000. But if A and B come together and they say let's split the cost, it's 10,000 apiece. Okay, you're tracking with me?
Yep.
With our program of shared ministry, that instead of it being 10,000 apiece, we're going to reduce that $20,000 total payment to 10. And now the cost per congregation is only 5. And so for the first 3 years, instead of paying $30,000, the congregation only pays the 15. And for year 4, it's reduced to 66%, and year 5 to 33% discount. And so we're hoping that the runway of 5 years, 60 months, will be a time that the congregations can gain their strength, see themselves doing more ministry. We had some great stories coming out of Pittsburgh when this project was really launched, where one of the congregations said, we're saving so much, we want to now hire an associate pastor part-time to do youth ministry. There was another project when the two congregations says, well, not only are we saving, but can we hire a church secretary to do the bulletins for the two congregations? And so the savings are passed on to the church. And as the church now recognizes that, the church is able to obviously do more for ministry.
That's great. That it opens up opportunities that more than likely would not have been there had they not entered into the shared ministry
That's right.
model of ministry. Um, so broadly speaking, just philosophically, if a church is thinking, you know what, maybe shared ministry, that might be where God is leading us, and maybe they've even got an idea of another congregation that they could reach out to and have that conversation. Obviously, that would then become something that is discussed with COM and all those
Mhm.
sorts of things. Writing a job description and a PDP, if I get my initials right, that is for both congregations. But as a church is thinking about pursuing this or exploring this further, what are some practical things that a church needs to be thinking about, needs to be aware of in contemplating shared ministry?
Thank you. We have what we call an 11-step guideline, and it's available at pensions.org, where it actually takes you through the first conversation, the second, the third, fourth, and fifth. And in that, you can actually track to see where are you, i.e., you don't have to finish step 3 before you look at step 8, because step 8 may be the one that really throws everything back to beginning. And so I would encourage you, if you're interested, to simply go to pensions.org and type in shared ministry. And you would see not only a description of the program, but you will see those 11 steps. And in those 11 steps, y'all, they're asking general questions. Is there a willingness of the congregations to share a pastor? Do we have the financial resources to pay a pastor? Um, Geographically, are the churches 5 miles apart, 10 miles apart, 50 miles apart? I will say that we do have some shared ministries now west of the Mississippi, where it's about 2 hour drive. And so what happens with that pastor is that she's doing a service on Saturday night at one congregation and then driving to the other congregation to do a Sunday morning service. And so shared ministry doesn't mean that you have to do the services on the same day. As I spoke to Steve prior to us getting here, one of the roadblocks or barriers that churches just cannot come to consensus on is that one church that want to give up that sacred worship time, whatever time that is, be it 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 or 11. And so if the churches are not willing to say that we're willing to change our worship time, that is, if the pastor is asked to do services on the same day, then that can be one of those prohibitive uh, kinds of roadblocks that you have to face.
A fly in the ointment, as it were, and that sort of thing. Yeah. But you
Uh,
mentioned some good points, and that's a great resource that we'll definitely link when we put this on the website to that 11 question sheet that the Board of Pensions puts out. But you mentioned proximity, just obviously that's being aware. It does sound like you have had experience of two churches doing it that are not super close.
yes.
um, they've been able to agree on how that works. You mentioned obviously the worship service. Um, whether I imagine how important is it for the churches culturally to be similar? And by that I mean, if is it important that both churches, like if both of them have an expectation that the pastor is in the office a certain amount of time, is that something that would have to be considered as well?
Thank you. Good question. And I think that's one of the things that hopefully in conversation it can be discussed. You know, the breakdown of percentages, again, if it's a 50-50 split, a 40-60, 70-30, 80-20, that is not a conversation that the board of pensions will orchestrate. That's really where COM, the pastors, the congregations will have that. That's working in the job description, the expectations thereof. And so, what we would like to say is that to the congregations and shared ministry, this is an opportunity for you to have a full time pastor, install and non install. But this person is going to be there for the two congregations. She or he makes the commitment in terms of the office hours, in terms of where are they. Um, there's one congregation, if they have a fellowship hour, does that pastor stay for that and then go to the other one? Or does that pastor come early for Sunday school, preach, and then go to the second congregation? All of that's going to be determined in that conversation. Um, I think too is that as we're looking at the possibilities, how many of you on the call are on COM? Just show of hands. Okay. Um, you know the dance partners. You know the friends, the first cousins, the second cousins, the in-laws, and the outlaws in terms of congregations. And so I would hope that you would bring that wisdom and that knowledge to the table so that congregations, as Steve has said, are not looking at this as a last ditch effort of survival, but they can see it as an opportunity to say, hey, let's do ministry in a creative way. And let's do ministry where we can support our pastor who's serving the congregation.
Yeah. That's great, Jerry. And you mentioned something a little earlier about the 50-50, 60-40, 70-30. So I'm assuming that what you mean by that is, you may have a church that's 30 members and a church that's 60 members. Obviously, a shared pastor is going to spend a little more of their time with the larger congregation than the smaller congregation. And so that it would make sense that that would be reflected in the amount of money that the church would put together from that congregation. Is that kind of what you were referring to there? It doesn't have, in other words, it doesn't have to be two evenly matched congregations, a perfect 50-50
Absolutely.
split. There's, as long as they're able to work it out and be in communication with the committee on ministry about how that works and have that understanding, and everyone in both churches is clear about that, there's different ways to slice that pie, I guess is what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, because I think that is one of the creative ways when we now speak of churches hypothetically, or as for an example, we have one shared ministry where congregation A owns a manse, and they're saying we're going to give the manse to the pastor. Congregation B says, well, thank you for doing that because we don't have obviously the resources to contribute toward housing allowance. So their split is about a 70-30. The congregation with the manse is paid for, but the utilities and all those things that are actually out of pocket cash. And so it's a 30 kind of 70 match, but understand, even at a 30-70, the congregation that owns the manse is a smaller congregation. And so they have even fewer members than the other congregation that's only paying the 30%. And so those are the kind of unique negotiations we're hoping that COM can creatively say to churches. There may be another one that, based on, as you said, if a 60-member church and a 30-member church, uh, you're sharing the pastor. But as you start the conversations, can we share musician? Can we share custodial staff? I mean, all those things when we're saying how do we utilize and make sure that our resources are supporting the ministry to which God has called us to be a part of.
And that's really great to hear you put it that way. And I think what I hear you saying is that it's really about crafting an equitable split of the, and the different variables that it would entail. Like you
Hmm.
said, if a
Hmm.
church has a manse, that that would be part of the equation as well.
Hmm.
Um, you mentioned earlier about, so there's shared ministry in general, and then there is the board of pensions support uh, incentives really for congregations in our denomination that decide to enter into PCA. So there's a lot of moving parts here in the sense of there's two congregations that sort of are dialoguing about this and see if it's possible. There's a CUM that would get involved to help deal with the mechanics of all of that. There's obviously I guess a joint search committee that would be formed at some point. And then there is, as you were alluding to earlier, the incentives that the Board of Pensions can offer congregations to, even for a 5-year runway, 60 months, lessen the financial impact on congregations as a way to encourage churches that might be on the cusp of doing this to really take that step. Is there anything else that you want to add to specifically the incentives from the Board of Pensions when it comes to shared ministry, Jerry?
Sure, thank you. And I think too, one of the things in terms of looking at the realities of resources again, that I would ask that COM, the Presbytery Mid Council leader, um, congregations, and pastors approach this as an opportunity. It doesn't have to be a new search. It can be a pastor serving a congregation right now who looks at their situation, recognizes the resources are not as strong as when she or he arrived, and they can come to you, Steve, and they say, "Look, I would like to look at, congregate. I'm pastoring congregation A, and you've asked me to moderate the session of congregation B. They like me. They don't have a pastor. What are the possibilities of me in this current call serving that congregation um, in terms of a shared ministry? The answer to that is yes. We have congregations in our program that say we don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the people power to do all the paperwork. So who would do this? Well, the way our program is set up, there's a submitting congregation and there's a cooperative congregation. And a submitting congregation can be that one that fills out all the paperwork, that pays the bills. We have one situation where the congregation says, "Look, we've got less than 10 members. We want to have this pastor to serve our congregation. Can we just pay congregation A? They bill us, and the board will accept that. The only thing that we'll have to make sure is that in the billing process is that they know that they're going to get a bill, because again the incentive goes to the congregation, all right,
Right.
not the submitting but to the congregations. So if it is a 50-50, and that treasurer says, "Look, if you would just go ahead and pay the bill, I'll write you a check once a month for our portion of it," we will work with that. So I want you to know, again, members of Providence Presbytery, that the board is willing to really extend and do what we can within the parameters of this program to make sure, regardless of the size of the church or the people power, we want to make sure that that pastor serving that congregation is covered by benefits. And the final thing I want to say about that is this also includes our covenant package. So the covenant package is only 10% of that salary. And that's done for a part-time pastor. So 10% or whatever it is, they can still participate in shared ministry. Now the incentive again is not $10,000, it's $5,000. So it's 50% up to 5,000, because it's not the full major medical and retirement and benefits. So keep that in mind too for congregation that say, we can't do a full-time call. Both congregations want to share the pastor. So the board has said, yes, if you enroll that pastor into the covenant package, only 10% of their salary, then you can still participate in shared ministry.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that. It's so good that y'all have this all kind of fleshed out and worked out, and are, like I said, providing incentives for this. I want to get to questions from the group. So there are two ways to do this. One, you can type it into the chat, and I'll be happy to read it out, and Jerry can answer it there. Um, or you can raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask it yourself. Either way is fine. So this will be we'll move to the Q&A of our time together. If anybody has any questions. Looks like State Clerk David Bender has raised his hand, sir.
Yeah, good to see you, Jerry. I've seen you at Montreat before. I don't know if we've ever shaken hands, but glad to have this time with you. A couple of
Likewise,
things that
thank you.
came up. One is you. I know you said this probably at the very beginning, and I just didn't write it down. Are these for full-time positions or half-time positions? Just whatever they can work out.
Right, both full-time and part-time. Now they are for ordained clergy. Right now, there is not an incentive program for CREs, but CREs can get benefits with the board, and those benefits, and it's something that's heavily discounted. So
Mhm.
if the church wants to get benefits for the CRE, they can get them, and knowing that what they're seeing on the menu is heavily discounted.
Very good. Is do the this may be in the 11-step process, but do the churches end up making a covenant with one another, or is it a three-way covenant between the two of them and the pastor? How's that work?
Thank you, David. It's a four-way covenant. So
Four-way
it's a
covenant with the
covenant
presbytery.
between the presbytery, the COM, the board of pensions, okay, and the congregations. And so the pastor makes a covenant with the congregations. Congregations make a covenant, vice versa, with the pastor. Presbytery makes a covenant with the pastor, congregation, and the COM and the board of pensions. And that four-way covenant is undergirded with prayer and support. From the board, I was sharing with Steve that when our church consultants are in town every other month, 6 times a year, there's a special time that we dedicate toward praying for the congregation, the pastor, and the presbytery. Also, 4 times a year from my office, we have care notes. We're sending one out now for Lent. We'll do one for Easter. We do one for Pentecost, and we do one for Advent. So we're trying to stay in contact with the pastors. And there's an annual um, kind of review, evaluation that we just simply ask the pastor, how's it going? We ask the church, are you benefiting from this program?
Is it do the churches often sometimes is it their goal to do things together if they're close enough, or is that not part of what you hope happens? I don't know.
Well, and David, because it's a new program, when
Yeah.
we have our evaluations coming in, really starting at the beginning of next month, is that we're going to find out, have the churches done, Christmas Eve services together? Have they done, Easter sunrise service or whatever the case may be? So we're still looking and learning, and hopefully we can hear some of those stories.
Yeah. And I got one more, and then I want to shut up and let all these other smart people talk. Um, I can't remember what it was. Oh, yeah, it was. My wife came home from APSI and told a story that a church, Presbyterian church, I guess, is doing, or maybe they're not doing it, but they suggested it. I don't know that it would work, but anyway, they are with churches who don't have a pastor. Have, they propose that the elders and church members do the service and they stream in live stream the sermon part from somebody else. I just throw that out there. That sounds like a mega church thing rather than a small church Presbyterian church thing. But have you heard of that or any of that going on?
David, I have heard of that, and it was not from mega church. It was from basically a congregation that the pastor was some distance away and recorded the service, and it was uploaded. So at that
Mhm.
point of preaching, they were able to push play, watch the sermon from that pastor. It was fresh as recorded sermon can be, and it was very suffice. So yes, those things are. COVID taught us a lot of different ways to have
Absolutely,
church.
absolutely.
David, actually, I know two churches in Eastern North Carolina and Presbyterian New Hope that did that very thing. They're about a
Really?
40-minute drive apart. And so they alternate. One Sunday the pastor's in this church, one Sunday the pastor is in that church. And when the pastor is not in that church, that's when I don't know if they zoom them in or play a pre-recorded sermon. I think it's a pre-recorded. So, and that seems to be working great for
I bet that lady who's going from Saturday night to Sunday every single week would like to try that. Just my
them.
There
guess.
you go.
Yes,
Thank you so
indeed.
much.
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dave.
Yes.
Any other questions? Yes, Doug.
Let me unmute so I can talk. Has this program worked with very diverse churches that don't um, have the same mission program, that just see the world differently? How does that
Duck,
work out?
Duck, we haven't received any applications that would fit that category. And I think I would say the reason why is that when COM and Presbyterian execs have congregations together, they're asking, can we do a shared ministry based on ministry philosophies? I guess the one of the examples of how that may differ would be if one congregation would have we desire more of a traditional service and another congregation may want more of a contemporary. Well, if the pastor is able to provide, leadership in those services, I think that may be a win. But to answer your question, we haven't received any of those applications where it was extremely to the right or to the left. And I would say that maybe that is something that COM could help a congregation recognize um, that if it's going to be a good fit for them. Mm-hmm.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Doug. Yeah. Steve.
Yeah, I appreciate your presentation. Sounds like a really creative and great program by the denominations doing this. Yeah, I understand positions for this is for a minister of word and sacrament, an ordained
Yes.
member of a clergy. Does it have to be an installed position? In other words, could there be a stated supply? I mean, we have a lot of churches that have stated supply pastors who've been there for years.
Yes.
So that could
It
be
does
done.
not have to be installed. It can be done. It doesn't have to be installed. It doesn't have to be full time.
And it's a 5-year program. What if things don't work out and the pastor leaves after 2 or 3 years?
And we did have some of that in the Pittsburgh project, in the sense that we had one case where the pastor got a call to go someplace else. We had another situation where the two churches just did not jail, and so Pittsburgh Presbytery said there's no need to force a relationship. And so it goes both ways, in the sense that the churches may say this is not working for us. The pastor may say I'm going someplace else. So you're not obligated, obviously. But now here's the one thing we will say is that if the congregation A and B call a pastor and that pastor does well there but goes someplace else, but they want to do shared ministry, then we will accept that new application.
Oh.
Okay. So it's not like they have, exhausted, the opportunity.
Yeah, and nice about it is it gives a church a 5-year financial assist. They know that they've got
It
that
does,
assist
yes.
for 5
Mhm.
years. So
Yes.
good, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Other questions? Going once, going twice. Well, friends, I think we've reached the end of our time together. I want to extend a thanks to you all for coming on this and others that might watch it later. But of course, a special thanks to Reverend Dr. Jerry Cannon for giving up his time and bumping his flight back home a little later so that he could zoom in from the airport to have this conversation with us. Jerry, we are so appreciative for your time tonight and really grateful for your continued service to our denomination through this good work.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Providence Presbytery, for your leadership, as well as the partnership that we have in sharing the gospel of Christ.
Amen to that. I also want to take this quick moment before we wrap up. Our next ministry toolbox will be exactly 1 month from today, March the 19th. We're going to be chatting with Erica Allen, Senior Ministry Strategist from Horizon Stewardship, about how to cultivate generosity in your congregation, which is something I think we all could use to do. So we're excited about that conversation with Erica. Friends, have a wonderful rest of the evening. God bless you this week, and thanks for all you do for the kingdom.